Hi, Allan.
Hi, Patricia. Hi, everybody. We're back again with more Metaphysical Egypt. This is now episode 35, and we're finally at the yin-yang shuffle.
We've been waiting for this. And when I show you, I have something really wonderful to show everyone that really gives you a visual for what we're talking about when we say the yin-yang shuffle. But Allan and I came up with that phrase many years ago when we were talking about this dynamic that we have been talking about for several episodes now. And this is that idea that we are waveform spinning, and at some point we stop, we take a big deep breath for a moment of silence, and then we start spinning the other direction. And here you can see, I love these two fish because they really show it beautifully, because each dot on the top of those fish, the black dot and the white dot, they represent that moment of silence that everything emanates from. And it is our yin and yang symbol, the way their bodies are moving, but it's showing us that everything emanates from the dot into this circling, cycling, spinning energy that creates our torus field. And it can spin either way depending on the magnetics. And this is all about electromagnetism. This is about everything we've been talking about. So let's just get started. And I sort of hinted the last time that we're going to do a whole episode on water, maybe two, because it's all about water. This is so important. And in the last episode, we talked about the consciousness of waveform, which was really, I think, mind-blowing for so many to realize that everything in our environment, anything made up of water, which is our atmosphere, it's in the space in between what we perceive as form, and it's within the form itself. We are made up of water, and water is conscious. Wow. So we'll start out. I'm showing you this wonderful image. This is the image of Nun, none, nothing, and he's also called in ancient Egypt Wajwer, the great green, and he's androgynous, and he contains all the unlimited potentials of the masculine seed and the spark of life or life force within the feminine womb that initiates all the creative potentials. And so together, it takes both. If we are in a state of movement, of a perception of a 3D or three-dimensional reality, we are in a polar state. There are dual opposites that come together to create this game board on which we can basically take this amazing journey of conscious perception. And so, they speak in ancient Egypt and ancient cultures all over the world about the fertility of the waters, this potential for creation. And, when they talk about in the beginning, it's everything emerges from the abyss of primordial consciousness, that moment of stillness, none, nothing. Hakeem used to make us say this saying about, we are the light, the light surrounds us, the light goes through us, we are the light. Well, I take that a step forward and say it's the waters as liquid light that surround us and go through us. We are the waters, and so we are the light. And it all begins to make more sense now. So, water has memory. This was a study done, in the late 1980s. Renowned scientist Dr. Jacques Benavista conducted a groundbreaking series of studies that suggested water had the ability to hold memories. This isn't new news, but I want to put this out there again. It's a reminder for all of us. He took proteins and diluted them in water until no trace of the original proteins remained. Then when he introduced this water to white blood cells, they reacted exactly as they would have had the original proteins still been there. Somehow water appeared to hold the memory of the proteins long after the proteins were gone. This was the basis and foundation of his study, but it did prove in a scientific way that water itself has memory. So, when I bring all this up, we don't think in our daily lives about these things, that water is conscious, waveform is conscious, the cells in our body are conscious. So it's a point I want to drive home now as we go further and deeper down the rabbit hole of, everything that we're experiencing in this very moment on Earth.
Isn't that also how homeopathy works?
Yes, it is. It is a basis of that for sure. Alternative medicine has, and I'm going to bring that up in a minute, has a better understanding of this, but it's not something that we're embodying. This knowledge as we go through our lives, we don't think, when we drink our water, that water, it's conscious, and how that water is treated. We've been told, the indigenous cultures all over the world told us, when the water no longer becomes drinkable, that will mean it's the end of times, time as we know it. Because this is, and the thing is, this has as much to do with our consciousness as the water. It takes a consciousness that allows, that's lost touch with the knowing that waveform is conscious, to allow our state of water to get to the stage that it's in, to pollute our waters in so many ways. I mean, and we're not going to talk about that now, but we have devolved to such a state where we can't drink potable water anymore. That's huge. And this is why I want to drive the point home at how important that water that we drink and that we need to hydrate with. Hydration, water is life. It's life force. Dehydration is death. And now we're drinking water that doesn't hydrate us. This is huge. It's really massive. But I'll go on. So water has memory, but Dr. Masaru Emoto also, his body and wealth of work has proved that water can feel and express itself. And all that work that he did studying the crystallization, the cymatics of water, to show that, polluted water gets ugly. It offers an ugly expression. And, when you put an intention into the water, that says, I love you, it forms a beautiful snowflake image. That they're all forming these beautiful shapes and forms. And I can remember the days when all of this information came out and people were putting labels on their water bottles saying, love, and I talked to my water, and, I still do that today. I'm honest about that, that we know it makes a difference.
Well, isn't that the same as saying a prayer over a meal?
Exactly.
And
the things we don't do anymore. Thank you, Allan, because we did grow up saying a prayer before we ate. And I know many families still do today, but we see less and less of families sitting down together anymore, that we're always off in so many different directions that we don't even eat together anymore in many cases. And we don't talk to our food before we eat it. You don't have to say a prayer out loud, but you can say a silent prayer to your food. You can have a conversation with your food. It's the same thing before you enter a structure. In a sacred structure, we are always told, we've been told by the indigenous cultures that we should be asking if it's okay to enter. But today we just barrel right in there and we start touching the walls and thinking like the place is this is great. Oh wow.
Well, that's also like muscle testing to see if something is good for you to consume at this particular moment. That's so interesting. It's all biogeometry.
It is, and this is how the ancients walked through life. And we never. When I was younger, I don't think I took enough time to really understand why. Why would I have to ask to enter? The first time I was told that. I have been growing since then. But I understand it now, and that everything deserves respect, and every living and breathing thing deserves respect. And that's something else I've noticed in my world, where I'm seeing that there is a lack of respect for animals, for other sentient beings, and even the knowing that everything is sentient. My gosh, we have devolved so far, and then you have the ancients who are aware of even what direction the magnetics, of the rock were when they were sitting, when it was in its quarry, and they marked it so it could still sit in that, and there's many reasons for that, but in the same cardinal, the same directions of its magnetics where it existed in the quarry. That's mindfulness on a level that we can barely comprehend. But I think if we can turn things around and get back to that, it will change everything in our environment. It'll be the reversal we've all been hoping for. Um, so yeah, this is big stuff. So I'll just say this quickly. In the 1990s, the Japanese scientist named Dr. Masamu Emoto expanded our understanding of water when he began studying how the molecular structure of water could be transformed when exposed to human words, thoughts, sounds, and intentions. Um, my new friend, who Allan and I met at the CPAC conference, we both went out in October of 2023 last year, and I did a presentation, and everyone asked me what was my favorite presentation, and Allan will tell you the first thing I said was Veda Austin. She blew me away. Sometimes, so many times we go to these conferences and we hear wonderful information, but often nothing we often don't hear anything new, something we haven't heard before. I heard many wonderful new things at this conference. And there's many incredible speakers, but the one that wowed me the most was Veda Austin, because she introduced this whole, and she reminded me what I had known before, and it's even sad that I had to be reminded that water and waveform and energy has consciousness, and that water can be influenced by thought, intention, and imagery. And what she's done is developed a method she utilizes Petri dishes, and she gives it the water and she'll pour water, and she's tested all different kinds of water too. Her work is extensive. It's profound. It's absolutely incredible what she's done and the wealth of the work that she's done. But she will do things like put something in the water. She'll put a picture under the water. She'll ask the water a question, and the water answers. This is huge. So the water can communicate with us. It can show frustration, gratitude, stress, and love. And during her presentation at the conference, she said she asked the water once what it was. What is it? What are you? And the water wrote out the letters LOVE. You even think, just take a moment and think of how incredibly profound and significant that is.
You should mention quickly, though, that she's getting these answers through the patterns that are formed by the ice crystals as the petri dishes begin to freeze.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Allan. I didn't finish that thought. So yes, and it doesn't have to freeze the whole way, and she does workshops to tell you on how to do this. I mean, after the conference, I went to Tucson and to stay, spend some time with a friend, and the first thing I said is, we got to go get ourselves some petri dishes and we did, and it was fun. I had a blast. I brought a whole bunch of petri dishes back with me because I did have some success with it, and I was blown away by it. And I have so many ideas for what we can do in the future. And I've talked to Veda about it since. She invited me to do a conference with her, and we have some ideas for some projects. And my head is spinning with so many ideas on what we can do with just this, not only with her methods and what she's doing, but also with the conscious knowing that water waveform and all its different, it's your blood, it's your saliva, it's your tears, it's the water in the Nile, it's the clean water we drink, and it's the dirty water we drink.
It's the moisture in the air, it's the clouds in the sky.
Everything is conscious and interacting with us. if this doesn't change the way you live your life, wow, I don't know what would. And it requires you taking this knowing and meditating on it and embodying it and realizing that everything you do and think has an impact on your body, on your environment, on your friends and family. Not only are we connected by this conscious waveform, but our intentions, our beliefs, our expressions, our passions, our emotions are affecting us. And it's not just because someone said so, it's now because you know it's true. Um, this is a picture of Veda. She's just written a book called The Secret Intelligence of Water. And, I can't wait to get a copy. There's a picture of a beautiful lotus that this was the intention or the photograph she put under the petri dish, and this is the image she got. And this is one of thousands and thousands of images that she's put out there, that is just mind-blowing. And this is another thing that, again, really blew my mind, is she put seeds in the water. And not only does she get, a picture of whatever it is she puts in the water, but in this case, the water, and this, she's done this with apples, she's done this with other fruits. She gets an expression. In this case, she's using a sunflower seed. And look at the beautiful in the center picture. You see the beautiful image of the sunflower. So the water didn't give her another image of the seed.
It showed her the potential of the seed.
Potential of it, a future potential. So again, the first thing I said to Allan is, think of all the questions we can ask to interact with this primordial knowledge of water.
Which is
And
really, would you say it's, like we talked about before, foundational consciousness?
it is foundational consciousness. But again, as she's pointed out, different waters give you different results. So it's a call for us to get back to pure water, to find methods. I think this should probably be the most important thing that humanity does into the future, is go back to finding a method for getting pure water. Because we don't have one. Even water, rainwater, is filled. And I've read so many papers on this, but with all the pharmaceuticals even that people are taking, where does that go? It goes out in your urine, it goes out into the water, it ends up back on the earth, and then it dehydrates right into the air. And when the rains come down, we're being rained on with medicine, pharmaceuticals. And that's just one of the many pollutants that we are putting out into our atmosphere, into our bodies. So, as I've said, and you've seen even with Dr. Emoto's pictures, when the water is unhealthy, the expression is unhealthy, and then we are in a state of disease, right? So this again, if anything changes the way we do everything, this knowledge is something that should be, this should be on every major news report, in my opinion. This is one method to wake up the world, and I applaud all the people that are working with this dynamic. And Veda Austin, she's fantastic, and I encourage you to look up her work and do her workshops, and as well as BioGeometry, who I've been talking about for so long as well. Dr. Ibrahim Karim has a book out with these signatures that he's created, and on the picture on the left, I have the signature waveforms for some of the things that he's actually done the study. And do you know that every organ in your body, every part of your body, your brain, your lungs, your heart, everything has a flow to it, and a directional flow, and it creates patterns. And this is ancient knowledge from Egypt. He didn't make this up. This is a knowing. The ancients knew it, and I'll talk about that in a second. But he's created these images and even a lot of pendants that are made in these particular diagrams or patterns. And when I took the class with them, he had us drawing them, to try and draw them as perfectly as possible. And he basically told us to pick something that's we don't feel is right within us and take that symbol and just work with it. And so I had actually gotten food poisoning a couple days before this class, and I still was feeling nauseous and terrible. So I took the intestines and I did it, and and we were doing it in class and drawing it, and then they had us get up and dance the pattern of whatever that organ was. And by the time I sat down, all of my pain was gone, and that is the honest truth. And you would think I would work with these things every day, but we get so busy in our 3D lives. But I have the book, and it is available to me. And when I do have a problem, I do take a look at what's there, because it does make a difference. These methods work. That's why they've been introduced to us. And I think I'm trying to hopefully give you the reasons why it works, because energy is conscious, and wave flow is conscious. And I'm also introducing it because we're talking about some things that are happening on the planet today that could possibly be causing a direction of wave flow. And if we are conscious and awake, it's a difference in how we walk through it, but also a difference in how we can awaken humanity to do it in such a beautiful, wonderful way. Instead of something that causes distress and disease and unhappiness. And then I have the images of the pendants that people wear, and the stones. I love to wear stones, all different kinds, and the different stones have a particular energy that like I had said with Veda, she's using certain shapes and forms and pictures, and the water is picking it up. So when you're wearing a certain stone, the water feels it. The water knows what its energy imprint is. When you wear an ankh, it has an imprint. It has many levels of deep meaning. This is why they used amulets in the ancient cultures, because those amulets put forward a specific energetic imprint. If you wanted to become pregnant, you might wear an amulet of Taret or Bes, right? Or you might walk around a well or a scarab like they do at Karnak, 7 times counterclockwise, because that helps your intention to be made real. And so, when we think, oh, wow, that's so stupid, you look at them over there walking, but there is an ancient knowing within all this. And I think this is what I want to put forward today. It's not what the episode's about entirely, but I want to get the wheel spinning. And hopefully, like I said, this information should be spread far and wide, because it could really change the way humanity communicates, expresses itself, and treats how we treat ourselves. We're asked all the time that we, and told we need to love ourselves. But this is the truth of how you love yourself. Be aware, be present with what you're putting in your body, in your mouth, through your ears, and what you're viewing, because it has an imprint on the waveform, the conscious waveform of your body.
The best thing really to do is align yourself with the patterns of nature, and you can't go wrong.
That's exactly right. Couldn't have said it better myself. Beautiful. And that's exactly what the ancients did. And here I have, again, the healing techniques. And we're bringing it back today, sound healing techniques, tone, color healing. All of these things are valuable, and they're valid. And here at Sakara, the site at Sakara, it wasn't just Abdel Hakim Allan that brought this knowledge forward, but there was a French archaeologist who worked at this site, and he also put this knowledge forward about how this particular area of Sakara, and again, I will do a whole podcaster episode on this healing. Hakim called it the healing hospital, the frequency healing center, whatever you want to call it. It's the Hebset court, and it exists in this wonderful site at Sakara, and it was there to use harmonic frequency to remove blockages, which is what causes disease. So again, I'm just putting it there because it has to do with frequency and shape and color. And the other thing that it was John Philip Lauer was the French archaeologist, and he worked all during the 1900s at this site. And he also brought forth some really interesting ideas about, first of all, how there were different shapes within the structures at Sakara that were the signature energy flows of the different organs. So that's why I said I would talk about that again, the biogeometry signatures. It has a history here. And within, I'm sure, sacred sites all over the world, this ancient knowing that when you are walking in the flow, the labyrinths all over the world, entrain the brain, right? Consciousness.
Right.
And brings us back into harmonic resonance. So you see where I'm going with this, that these things are effective. We don't need synthetic medicines. Yes, when you break a leg, you need surgery, and they had those tools as well. But there are ways to heal the distress and the dis-ease in the body that work. And we don't, as I said, we don't need to do things that cause other problems. I even have this image all the way on the far right, and not many people are aware of this. And I got a wonderful book, and I don't have his name in front of me, but he sent me his book, and he brought forward some of the things that I've been talking about and the work of John Philip Lauer. But this image is the entryway into Sakara, and the columns themselves.
What do they call it? The field of reeds?
They call it, well, it is a field of reeds. And each one of those columns has about 17 reeds, right? They're bundles of reeds. And there's so many things that I like. I promise you we'll do a whole episode on this. But what I want to point out now is the spaces between the columns represent the spine of the human body. And that's just the beginning of the story. It's huge. So many things here within how they utilize the structure of energy, for their architecture, in their, healing practices. They understood the energetic matrix of the body and its flow, and they knew how to send the right thought, tone, color, in order to release the blockage, to restore health and harmonic resonance. So big stuff. So I actually saw this today, and I threw it in the presentation, and it says, the more you awaken spiritually, the more energy becomes your primary language. You begin to understand, know, and trust it more than you do the words that come out of people's mouths. Energy never lies. And this is important too, because we are in a state again. We have devolved to such a state that not only do we lie to each other, but we lie to ourselves. We've developed an inner communication that allows us to basically justify us doing anything we want to do. You want that extra cookie, you'll find up a lie. You'll find one to tell yourself, you deserve it today. You won't do it again tomorrow. And what I'm saying is, we are so wrapped up in the forms and in our contained way of thinking that that if we lived and more from a right-brained, heart-based perception of reality, we couldn't lie. That's the difference. And that's the energy. That's the yin-yang shuffle. We're moving back out of left brain consciousness, separation consciousness, where we have devolved to such a state, that we've forgotten all this incredible knowledge, and we're moving to a place where we intuitively know, and we no longer can lie to each other or to ourselves. And that's huge. That's big. And it starts with remembering that everything is conscious and has feelings and emotions and intentions and knowing. We should treat everything, better than we treat ourselves, that's for sure. And we should start treating ourselves a whole lot better too. And this is one more thing that I want to show because it blew me away. I think I did send this to you, Allan, because it just literally blew me away. And this is actually one of the Petri dishes with an imprint of scalar energy. Veda Austin, she posted this on social media, and I'm just presenting it as she posted it. And this was sent to her by a friend, and he was asked by the folks from the Enhanced Energy System in New Zealand to use his freezing technique, her freezing technique, to see how water responded to scalar energy. They gave him some water that had been through the scalar field to use. For this image, he asked water what scalar energy looked like prior to freezing. So the minute I saw this, I saw the tree of life.
You can see the trunk of it down there near the bottom.
It's the roots and the branches, and it said, this is a great breath. It's just beautiful. And with all the work that she's done, she has come up with a whole system of hydroglyphs that water will present. They're symbolic, basically. So it's ancient primordial knowledge. And the 3 hydroglyphs in this image calls the creation glyph, meaning creation, the lung glyph, meaning breath, and the tree of life glyph, meaning whole breath of creation. Wow, this blew me away. So I gave you a description of what scalar energy is here, just to understand. We've talked about it in other podcasts. But a scalar wave is a multidimensional spherical standing energy array that radiates out of a static point of sound, light, vibration within the morphogenic field of the greater cosmic unified field of consciousness. And we could talk so much more about this. I've just been looking at, with all the talk about what's happening on the eclipse coming up. I was looking into the boson Higgs field, and the Higgs field is scalar energy, of course, and the boson Higgs is the God particle. So you see how this is all interwoven into our modern day expressions, into our, the ancients knew this stuff, and this is all our work here that Allan and I are doing to present this to you, is to bring this forward. That, the ancients, they knew what we're discovering today. And that's huge. And the only way, in my opinion, not the only way, but the way that they knew it is because they were in a heart-based right brain consciousness with the ability to go to those moments of silence, in between the 2 hemispheres, when you are totally in a state of oneness or gnosis. So again, here we have it. Can you see the tree of life within the Taurus field? And it's the tree of life. It's beautiful. And, all is atom, all is atom in our 3-dimensional field of perception, our perception of reality. All is atom, and it all starts with the hydrogen atom, which is the double square that separates heaven and earth. We've already talked about that. And of course, it's the Sima Tui. There is the tree of life. And that's probably one of the most ancient symbols in Egypt. And we've had this up several times throughout the podcast. It's basically the lungs, the trachea, and the voice box. Life is a dance of constant retreats and expansion with moments of silence. It's an ebb and flow of life force, water, conscious waveform. When you breathe with intentions, all can be transformed in one great yogic breath. So we've said that before, how many times? But now I think you have a better understanding of why that is true. If we are conscious even with our breath, we can make a difference. We can transform our reality. Wow, we are powerful, and we don't know it. So here we can see, in images we've been seeing a lot lately, but it's showing us that the same dynamic is happening within us. And this is what, I'm really trying to point out today. This dual opposing spin, this, yin-yang shuffle is part of who we are at the primordial level. and it's huge. It's a dynamic that is happening, in within us, and with every breath, and within nature, and every breath in nature. And it's happening within our solar system as well, and within our galaxy, and within, the entire universe of galaxies. This is a fractal dynamic that is happening, a breath of life, this intake and outtake and patterning of, movement and non-movement and reversed movement. And it can't be any other way. And here we see this amazing image. This is from Abydos, and it's the fetish of Osiris. It's his head. When the Jed pillar becomes erect, is lifted, so it's pointing the spine of the earth, the axis of the earth, the axis or spine of humanity is pointing to our center at the ecliptic pole. We have that moment of silence, and look what's happening at the bottom. This is an expression of even, we did a whole thing on the Ark, many episodes on the Ark of the Covenant. It's an expression of that. And this is the power that's within that expression, in that moment of silence. And again, it's sitting on the sled. It's a moment of non-movement. And at the bottom, here are our lions, and they're in a mummified form. And you have the vulture wings, right? That magnetic field, that holding them in. Mut is the great womb, right? The vulture is the womb that holds us. In the image that I showed you in the last episode of the vulture, Mut, with her neck bent, even with her wings around the figure who's meditating in a moment of silence. So you can see the vultures on the two lions, and the lions again, Tefnut, right? The divine feminine currency, right? Expressed, it's the earth currents, the moving currents that create our 3D perception of reality are silent. And then they emerge again. Which way will you spin? This is what we're talking about. Here is another wonderful image. It's from Tutmos III's tomb in the Valley of the Kings. And boy, it's an incredible, if you ever get the opportunity to go, it's not the easiest tomb to get to. You have to climb stairs, climb down. But what's inside, even though it looks like pen and ink drawings, is profound. And here we're looking at basically, the emergence from Plato's cave, right? From this left brain perception of reality in a night cycle. And it's written about in the Amduat. It's a book about Ra's journey through the 12 hours of the underworld, the night. The underworld is the other hemisphere, right? When we're having a day cycle, the southern hemisphere, the northern hemisphere is having a day cycle. The southern hemisphere is experiencing a night cycle, and that's what Osiris represents. He's the man in the moon during a night cycle. And so this particular expression that I'm showing you, which is the eye basically rising on the horizon, created by the arms of Thoth, Jehuti, and Horus, right? And it's the eyes of Ra. It's said to be saying it's the eyes of Ra, the sun, are regenerated after his resurrection, right? So after he comes to the moment of silence, and right before, and then he emerges on the horizon of a new day cycle, his eyes, his senses are regenerated, right? And that's the moment we're walking into. Our senses, our ability to know what we're experiencing, are going to be regenerated. That's why we want to spin the other way. That's why we want to start migrating back into a right brain perception of reality. And savor that moment of silence when we have that feeling of being at one with everything that exists in the universe. Because once you've had that moment of bliss, and we've talked about people that have near-death experiences and how they experience that, and they still choose to come back because they know it's all part of the journey that we're on. I could talk so much about that, but we'll save that. And so, once you have that experience, you live your life differently. And I told you about the woman, the beautiful young woman in Scotland who had the near-death experience, and she only lives in the now moment now. She won't make plans. She won't promise to be doing anything or be anywhere the next, in the next moment, in any future moment, because of her near-death experience. She lives in the now, and I love that. Because the minute we start planning and things fall through, we have all kinds of feelings about that can pull us down. But you live in the moment, it can be beautiful and magical. But let's go on. So here we have, I've shown you this several times too, the resurrection of the Jet Pillar, which is the spine of Osiris, humanity, the land, and the axis of the earth being raised to point to that ecliptic pole, the Cat's Eye Nebula. You think it's too good to be true, but that's the work of divine source, the great architect. My gosh, it's imperfection. It can't be any other way. And we see how the eyes are restored, and the two waveforms come together in the disk of the sun, Wadjet and Nekbet. And again, this is known by many researchers that this is also representing the end of one world age and the beginning of another. Big stuff. So yeah, there's our Cat's Eye Nebula, and I just saw this posted, and it's just so beautiful. And there's the eye and the symbol of the double infinity that we talked about in the last episode, between the symbols of the sun and the moon, the duality. Beautiful. And then I saw this as well, and it's one of that esoteric drawings from the last century. It's Freemason Rosicrucian Compass from 1779, and it's from the book The Freemason. And to me, I saw it. It just spoke to me, getting off the merry-go-round, right? You see at the bottom, in between the pillars of Boaz and Joachim, you see the merry-go-round going, and that's the game board. We're on that merry-go-round of all this experience between the sun and the moon. But take a look at the top, because you see the sun and the moon radiating the energy of Pater, and upside down, you see Mater, all right? And these are our root words: mother, mater, matter. Right? Water is upside down. Do you see that? The M becomes a W, right? And of course, pater is the word for father, and you're the linguist, Allan, in many different ways. And it's also pater, right? The divine potter who forms and molds us into form, and patterns. So patterns of matter, right? It's the masculine and the feminine, and so much more. And, Chandler Hall, a post on social media, he said this, and I thought it was so beautiful here. The goal is to balance the polarities, masculine and feminine, theology and philosophy, superstition and logic, emanation from above to below, emergence from below to above. It's the great breath outward, and of course the great breath inward. Ascending and descending are one and the same. The experience is key. To be here, to be truly here, is the only way to experience the transmutation of the poles. This is where we're heading. The Trinity with the Father, mankind lower, the Son, mankind upper, and the Holy Spirit as mother in the middle. And that's Isis and Osiris and Horus. And then I turned it upside down, because you know how I am. If you see the words at the top and the bottom, when it was right side up, the top says superius, and the bottom it says inferius. So I had to look it up, right? And what we're actually looking at is the digestion of form. Inferius means a force of unmatchable aura of fear and pestilence, a force that no one should ever try and trifle with, a being which derives from, harvests, and devours the souls. It's like the skull, right? But basically, it's digestion of form, which we have come to call evil, right? So anything reversed, just like we've talked about, where the devil is lived backwards, right? So we take digestion of form and we put it in a container and wrapped it up and called it evil, right? Evil spelled is life spelled backwards.
Right.
And so I was just pointing this out, that this is all a misunderstanding of ancient knowing. This is digestion of form, which is taking us back to the heart, or breath out into creation and form. And it's just a journey inward and outward. And then I thought it was cool because in the wizarding world, of Harry Potter, an Inferius is a plural of inferi, by the way, is a corpse that has been reanimated by a dark wizard's curse. So many little interesting tidbits. But we'll keep going. And this image on the right is, this is your journey. Here's the hero's journey. It's a sine wave pattern. We've seen all of this in many different ways. But the writing posted with this was Masonic tracing board with a portal to another dimension appearing between the pillars of heaven and earth. There are 3 degrees. And remember, these pillars show up at the birth of Hathor, right?
Mm-hmm.
As a face of form. And under her chin, we see these pillars.
And the checkerboard pattern.
And the checkerboard pattern, exactly. Thank you. They go on to say there's 3 degrees of Masonic tracing boards. The initiate is the 1st degree, and it's a view of the macrocosm and our place within as a part of it. Our limited physical existence and the various phases of spiritual development are represented as ashlars, fellowcraft, 2nd degree. Okay. 2nd degree is the view of the crossing where the physical world and spiritual truth meet, the point where without becomes within. We can see a retrospect and a prospect of our voyage to knowledge, the reborn seed ripening into an understanding of life, which is at the center of all of us, all and at once, the mystery of nature's grand circle. It's just what I just said, strangely enough. And then the master, or the 3rd degree, shows us the point of transition between the physical and spiritual, from the finite to the eternal. Thing of the earth, mere physical labor and its results are transient, conjured from dust, plasma, as mountains from sand, and returned by time to the shore of the eternal waters from which we are all sprung. Primordial Waters. So again, these drawings really, people have called it Masonic and evil, and, but they're just expressing a depth of ancient knowledge that we've forgotten. We've actually forgotten what it meant. So here I do have the image here of those beautiful pillars, checkerboard pillars, which is one. And here is this Masonic compass. And I took this in the a Masonic temple in Philadelphia. A friend of mine, 2 friends of mine took me there. And it's just so beautiful because you see that image of the compass and the square. There's so many meanings here. But the compass tells us how far you are from your center, right? That eye in the center, the ecliptic pole, and again between the pillars. So being square in your actions implies being honest and fair. The tools to remember how we find our way back to center. Compass is where we get our word compassion. When we have compassion, meaning we understand that we are connected to everything that is. And when you have compassion for something, you bring us everything closer to the heart. And, in many cases, we've lost compassion. That's the energy of Kuan Yin, too, in the Far East. And here's the potter's wheel. I put the eye in the center where Tarot sits to give birth to this expression, the game board. And you can see on the image on the right, I have an arrow coming from Osiris, who's taking that first step, 23-degree angle from center. and through the pillars, right, the obelisks, and to take that journey up all the way to our center. There's a lot here, but this is expressed in imagery everywhere in the world. It's also, immediately I thought when I saw that, the last one of, I loved Dante's Divine Comedy, and I remember that, Beatrice's purgatory was described in this same way, this cycling pyramid, you're cycling up to the top of the pyramid where you have paradise, right? It's always the same thing. And I include these things to remind us as we're, reading and experiencing and seeing things, that they're all literally showing us these same cycles. And when you're awakened to the symbols and the cycles and the flow of the patterns, then you are consciously interacting with them. And again, just a few more. Here's this wonderful spoon in the shape of an ankh, really. And you have the two images of Bes coming together. You see they're holding on the erect papyrus pillar. Right? So again, giving you, it's a device, it's a cosmetic spoon in the shape of an ankh. And it's giving us the same expressions we've been talking to, the womb of primordial waters, and just beautiful, beautiful imagery everywhere. And it is a resolution of polarity and a digestion of form. And how do we know this? Because it's all embedded within the story of Horus and Set. It's happening, and we've talked about this already before, but you have Taret in the center holding on to the leg of the bull, the Big Dipper, right? And Horus is about to kill the beast, which is not a beast. It's stopping the spin for our moment of silence. And it happens at a specific time. And that was our moment of silence before we fell into form. And then we reverse direction, yin-yang shuffle. But do it again in the age of Aquarius. And we've talked about that a lot too, as the moment when we turn lead into gold. And here on the far left, you can see my image of the time-space continuum, the matrix, Plato's cave, the waveform that holds us hostage. And look what it is tied to, but the mooring.
Wow.
Just wanted to point these things out. This is big. Every piece falls into place. That's the most amazing thing about this journey of research that I've been in. Every single key falls into place. Nothing's missing. Nothing doesn't work. And it consistently blows my mind anyway. So yeah, it's an escape from the matrix of the mind and back to the heart. So one of the things we've talked about a little bit within these cycles, because we're really going to get into these cycles now of, how we have this yin-yang shuffle and return to a heart-based perception of reality in a day cycle. And, a lot of people have wanted to compare the ages and stages of consciousness as described by ancient Egypt with that of the Yuga cycles in India. And so this was just posted recently, and it totally gave me the answer I needed. So bear with me as I read through this. It's going to blow your mind, because one of the things that didn't work is a lot of the people that have written about the Yuga cycles have said that it does fit the great year cycle. However, there's this difference between, because I've always said it's a 24,000 year cycle, right? And this is what he's writing about here, is what he calls the Yuga cycle, or maybe I called it the Yuga cycle dilemma. But what is the reason for the mismatch in values between 24,000 year Yuga cycle and the 25,800 to 26,000 year cycle? That so many of the, basically of what everybody is saying the great year is. So many different people who've written about the Yuga cycles have said it's 24, and some have said, no, it's 26. And so I'm just going to share this with you because it's so important. And he says the slow change in the position of the equinoctial sun against the backdrop of the fixed stars of the zodiac is called the precession of equinoxes, just a refresher for you, or simply precession, while the cycle duration of 25,800 years is called a precession cycle. Human civilizations lived through 12 astrological ages in the course of this 25,800 year precession cycle. Now, here's the mystery that had baffled me for a long time, what I just said. So he says the duration of the great year specified by Cicero is that 26,000 year cycle. And it's so close to the scientifically measured value of the precession cycle that leaves little doubt that the two cycles must be identical. And I've said the same thing, but something wasn't working. So he goes on to say, moreover, the Yuga cycle doctrine of the Jains, which I had discussed in the original article on the Yuga cycle, strongly hints at this possibility. If we recollect, as per the Jains, the Yuga cycle consists of an ascending half called Sarpini, which is comprised of 6 smaller periods, and a descending half called Sarpini. I'm probably destroying how you pronounce those names, but which is comprised of 6 periods as well. Thus, the complete Yuga cycle consists of 12 smaller periods. What could these 12 periods be if not the 12 astrological ages, right? If the complete Yuga cycle is comprised of 12 astrological ages, then it gives us a very good reason to suspect that the Yuga cycle and the precession cycle are one and the same. And this is what Allan and I have been saying since we started talking about this, that it absolutely has to be the same. So here is the solution, and to me, it's just fabulous. There are 2 moments of silence in the Yuga cycles, and that's what I've been saying was left out, that it was identical to what the ancient Egyptians had said, but I was unaware that there were 2 moments of silence expressed in the Yuga cycles, because no one has talked about it that I've read until I found this. So he says, I found an answer to this conundrum when I came across a key piece of information about the Yugas mentioned in the ancient Greek texts that I had overlooked earlier. As per the doctrine of the ages of man in Greek tradition, the earth is subjected to 2 extended periods of purging in the course of the great year. One is called, cataclysmos. Oh, that was easy. Cataclysmos. Cataclysmos, right? Meaning deluge, or the great winter of the great year, when the earth is inundated by water. The other is called ekpyrosis. Now we know what that's going to mean, meaning conflagration, or the great summer of the great year, when the world is destroyed by fire. In the 3rd century, the Roman philosopher Centurinus wrote, there is a period called the supreme year, superiosis, the supreme year by Aristotle, at the end of which the sun, moon, and all the planets return to their original position. This supreme year has a great winter called by the Greeks cataclysmos, which means deluge, and a great summer by the Greeks, as we already said, ekpyrosis, or combustion of the world. The world actually seems to be inundated and burned alternately in each of the epochs. Wow. This blew my mind. I don't know about you, Ellen, but it blew my mind. It is pointing out what we've been saying all along, is that there are 2 moments of silence. And I had never known that it was in the Yuga cycles. Probably somehow it was suppressed or taken out. And I'm so happy that this particular researcher, and I don't want to say his name because I'm sure I'll say it wrong, Bibhu Dev Misra, has discovered, and at least for me, it was something I had not come across before. And he is literally saying that it's the same thing. It's the night cycle and the day cycle. It's of the moon, which is watery, and the sun, which is fiery, and it's primordial waters, and it is the sea of fire, right? That's also part of the cycles, right? The lake of fire that you must go through. So they're basically speaking about these 2 dynamics that we've been talking about all along. It's identical.
So you're saying at one of the moments of silence is the cataclysm, the deluge, the
The water,
flood, and the
right?
other moment of silence in the 26,000 year cycle is
The lake
a,
of fire.
a destruction by fire.
But wait a minute. No, humans call it destruction by fire. I call it digestion by fire, dehydration. So what does this mean? As per the doctrine of the ages of man in Greek tradition, the earth is subjected to 2 extended periods of purging, right? So we just said all this. So when we go further, when the world is destroyed by fire. Oh, so they went on to say exactly what you just said, Alan. Sorry. So when the earth is inundated by water, and the other is when the world is destroyed by fire. And I say this is a metaphor, and that's what's been missed. For the primordial waters of consciousness that emerge from the abyss that hold the seeds and potentials for creation, as I showed you in the very first slide of this episode, right? And it's the lake of fire that digests form. And this is what Sobek represents. So, of course, it has to be fire the second time. But the fire only represents digestion of form.
Mm.
The primordial waters represent creation by the breath out. The fire represents digestion by the intake of breath. Does that mean we're actually going to be destroyed by fire? Well, destruction is basically digestion. It's destruction of form, right? It's the end of time as we perceive it, right? It doesn't mean it's the end of the world. And digestion of form can come through perception. There's your lake of fire. It's purification in the lake of fire. And there's your primordial 8 again. So we have a sea of water and a sea of fire, but they're all just waveform.
And why are they baboons?
Well, that's Thoth. That's Thoth as the baboon represents consciousness from within, or heart-based consciousness. So, see, that's a return to heart-based consciousness. The primordial 8 on the other side, at the creation of form, the primordial 8 are serpents and
frogs.
serpents and frogs that have to do with sperm and creation.
Right, fertility and...
So it literally is a metaphor for an understanding of the dynamics of waveform. And we're caught up in these ideas of catastrophe and the end of the world, destruction by fire, inundation by water. These events are, as Susan keeps telling me, we are not sure there was ever an inundation, a worldwide inundation. There is no record of that happening anywhere. There are floods, there are cataclysmic events, but she is so adamant. And Susan, by the way, is my geologist, my very good friend, and the Horace Isaac geologist. She comes, she has accompanied me on many tours here in Egypt and all over the world, and good friend of Allan's. And she is a world-class Jurassic geologist. And all along, when anybody talks about these great catastrophic events, she keeps saying, but there was no great catastrophic events. Worldwide catastrophe, but there are catastrophic events, and they happen everywhere. Now, obviously, if the world stops spinning, we will have catastrophe. And in the next episode, we are going to talk about some dynamics of what's possible with everything that's happening. But then, I'm going to remind everybody about these lectures, these episodes where we talk about that it's all perception, consciousness in waveform, and see if we feel a little differently about what's about to occur, because I think it's something we need to be excited about and not afraid of. So just a thought. And here's another wonderful image of an ancient Egyptian and this is great, a wonderful book called Hathor's Alchemy by Alison Roberts. And I have a couple of her books, and she talks a lot about this moment of reversal and as being a fractal pattern as well. And here she is citing this picture, and she says near her legs, this is a feminine. I don't know if it's I think it's a tomb of a queen or a noble, but near her legs are a snake and a crocodile. The two creatures are also encircling the zodiac in Osiris's later tomb, which is associated with the sun's annual reversal between the 6th and the 7th months. But what you're looking at the top, on either side, you can see the Ka of Ra and the Ba of Ra. And at the bottom, if you look, you see a crocodile. And on the other side, the serpent. So it's exactly this expression I was just talking about, is you have this serpent being the creation from, this great breath outward, and the crocodile being the digestion on the other side. And the Ba, digestion back into spirit. And the serpent is the Ka of Ra, being the animating life force of form. So these are the two sides of self, and there's literally a reversal, an annual reversal that it's showing between the 6 and 7 months, just like we have a reversal on our clocks at the 6th hour. And I remember in that same place in Philadelphia, the Masonic Temple in Philadelphia, they had a clock up in one of the big rooms, and we went with a tour group around to several of the wonderful rooms there. And there was a big clock, and at the bottom they had the 6, and the 7 was upside down. And a couple people in the audience asked the leader, the group leader who was taking us through, who was a Mason, what it meant. And he said, well, we've kind of sort of forgotten what that means. And I said to myself and the people I was with, I said, I know what it means, because it was the moment of reversal, right? We're at the 6th hour, everything reverses. And so it's hidden in this ancient symbolism, this knowing that everything reverses. And we've shown this before. Everything breathes in spiraling motion into and out of the heart of creation, and it's an intelligent breath. Wow, it's big. And there's a flipping. You see the hourglass?
Mm-hmm.
The sands of the hourglass go down, and when they're totally off of the top, everything has to reverse because it can't be any other way. And I love this. If we could turn back time. Sorry, I'm not going to sing for you. But literally, I saw this come up with the image of the swallow over the mouth, which is that, the mouth through which we are born, the circumpolar stars, and it's sitting there with the symbol and the symbol together means turning back. And from Laird Scranton again, because they're underneath, on the right, I have the swallow on top of the mound, the primordial mound of creation. And the swallow is always associated with this. And Laird says, the glyphs of the Egyptian term for swallow read, concept of the place of energy's existence as a spiral. Scientifically, resonance is credited with the formation of spiral galaxies. For the Dogon, vectors of energy emitted from spinning energy at points of resonance define the world spiral. And of course, the Dogon is that tribe that the tribe that they believe came out of Egypt and has so much knowledge and knew all about Sirius and Sirius B. And they believe they emerged from ancient Egypt. And he also says that during the Old Kingdom, swallows were associated with stars and therefore the souls of the dead. Chapter 86 of the Book of the Dead specifically instructs the deceased on how to transform into a swallow. And the spell 1216 of the pyramid text, the pharaoh describes the swallows as the imperishable stars. Well, that's even more interesting. So it is the mouth, and it's made of spirals. So you see how the game board gets more and more interesting. And I should point out that the Dogon tribe, I believe they went to Mali in North Africa, I think.
Near Timbuktu.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Thank you. Um, so yeah, reversing the spin of the circumpolar stars, the mouth through which we are born when the heavens begin to spin again after a moment of silence. Again, just another expression of saying the same thing. And I did show this before, but I just love it. You know, the swallow appears in paintings of the solar bark as it enters the underworld, where the swallow is usually shown on the prow of the boat as the announcer of the sun's approach. And I relate this to that Noah's Ark moment. Of course, the swallow is there as we enter the underworld, the night cycle, the inundation, right? We're inundated, and then we come out of the primordial waters on the mound, and we look for the bird. Is we know that the birds fly and love to sit on the highest thing in its environment. We see them sitting on flagpoles and telephone poles and things like that. So yeah, it's an incredible expression here. And on the same boat, you see images of Sa, which means perception, and there's Toth. And, you know, this is a journey of perception. We don't have to worry about cataclysms. If we remember, we are not our bodies. This is another image. It's from Dendera. I believe Jocelyn took this image and posted it on social media from one of our journeys together. And you see the swallow again, and it's on the bark. And underneath, you see the symbol for R, which is the mouth. Through which we are born, right? And you see the stargate and the eye on the sled. It's a journey of perception from the stars out of the blue primordial waters. And the Ouroboros. So, you know, it doesn't get any better. Um, and here are the swallows again in this image of Sokar. And it's said to be the splendid place at the beginning of time. His place is Rostau at Zep Tepi. And that image on the top that looks like a T is Pet. It's the heavens. And it's that moment when the heavens stop spinning. And it's the moment we have this beautiful serpent going across the two hemispheres of the brain and the two hemispheres of the earth. And that's that line that Allan and I talked about in a previous episode. It was pretty long ago, but we brought it up since. And it's that ancient magnetic equator that ran around the earth, because these patterns are fractal. And when we had a moment of silence, that's how the Earth's magnetic grid was divided into two complete halves in perfection. And then as we began to spin, we spun out, and the line, all of the lines begin, not all of them, but the lines, some of the lines begin to move. The ancient magnetic equator began to split and move into two different directions. And these are the stories we've already shared. But I bring up again because we are going to talk about these moments in time. And the next stop on our journey is the moment of silence and purification by fire. And I love this quote from Eckhart Tolle: "You are never more essentially, more deeply yourself than when you are still." I wish I had more time to meditate. I know I keep driving the point home, but I'm kind of hoping it will become something that everyone knows on some level. Separation and inhalation with a reversal of spin. And it's expressed everywhere. It can't be any other way. There we have at the bottom, we have our sphinxes emanating from center. That's Sokar at the bottom. The dual opposing wave spin. And if you look at the serpents, we have, one with the human head and one with the serpent heads. And in between the two sphinxes, which represent yesterday and tomorrow. And yeah, just so many dynamics. I found this image, this is great, of Athena and it's from the Louvre, 5th century BC. And look at on top, we have an image of the Sphinx. Isn't that incredible? And it's representing, again, this dynamic. Athena represents wisdom, and she's also related to Ninth, who is the primordial, who is the womb of primordial waters. So as above, so below, as within, so without. It can't be any other way. And Hans posted this today. He just got back from his adventures in the Yucatan. And look at this great image of the figure, you know, the mask in the center, but look on either side. He's in the cave, and the cave has two expressions, and one is the eagle, and one is the lion, right? The red one is the lion, earth-based currency. The eagle is heaven-based, right? Sky-based currency. It's everywhere. You'll start to see it. It's just so many things I could point out. Turning back time is resolving polarity. This is from Daryl Medina, and you see the two path openers facing each other, bringing the vision back to center. And then they turn around. And here is Anubis, and he's emerging from the ecliptic pole to embalm us in the energy that will hold us hostage in form. But what I wanted to point out with this slide is, of course, Whipplewat is the one. He's in the upper right-hand corner. He's the one that brings us back to center by digesting form. And it's not only does Anubis create our, you know, the field that contains us and protects us from the radiation from the heavens, but it also, he is the alpha dog riding the mare that begins the process of the tones that create our alphabet, our language, written and oral, that we need in order to communicate in an earth-based reality. But Whipplewat brings us back, right? It's the collapse of time and space and language, because we no longer need language when we are perceiving from the heart or right brain consciousness. Isn't that cool?
And the little curl reminds me of the omega symbol, which
Doesn't
we see in Hathor's hair.
Yeah, it's really, it's the imagery is incredible, and understanding it is even more exciting. So I wanted to bring this up. I mentioned you and I, Allan, discussed this week. This idea, you know, I was thinking of the double slit experiment, and it speaks about, you know, we are both the particle and the waveform. Well, this is what I'm putting forward from this idea of the double slit experiment, is that we are both the particle and the waveform, depending on the perception of the observer. So yeah, the double slit experiment, if you're not familiar with it, is one of the most famous experiments in physics, and definitely one of the weirdest, because it demonstrates that matter and energy, such as light, can exhibit both wave and particle characteristics, known as the particle-wave duality of matter. Depending on the scenario, according to the scientific communication site, Interesting Engineering. According to the University of Sussex, American physicist Richard Feynman referred to this paradox as the central mystery of quantum mechanics. We know the quantum world is strange, but the two-slit experiment takes things to a whole new level. The experiment has perplexed scientists for over 200 years, ever since the first version was performed by British scientist Thomas Young in 1801. And what I'm saying is, well, of course it depends on the observer. It's perception. Are we going to be contained as a particle, or are we going to be the waveform itself, feeling everything as we go? So, you know, we tend to forget, you know, and science didn't realize for eons of time that when they do their experiments, their expectations, their observance alone has effect on the experiment.
Right.
Because waveform is conscious. So the fact that it's an interaction has basically negates a lot of experiments that have been done over the ages, in my opinion. Because if we are affecting our environment, then, how can you trust as fact something that we created and results that we created according, by the core beliefs of these scientists who did the experiment, right? We are creating this environment as we go. And I believe that we can digest it just as fast. In other words, if we don't like the pattern, cut the head off it, like Ra the cat does with the snake. Cut the head off the pattern that no longer serves you. You can change your reality in any one great yogic breath. Big stuff. And this from Walter Russell, and we are winding down. This one, Walter Russell, man's transformation by science will take much time, but it can begin now. A beginning is a reversal of direction. To reverse the direction of the downward plunge is to begin to climb into the heights. The world needs new metals. Many new rustless metals of greater density, malleability, and conductivity await division in vast quantities from carbon and silicon. These will be found when science discards its concept of matter as being substance and becomes aware of the gyroscopic control of motion, which will split the carbon tone into isotopes as a musical tone is split into sharps and flats. Of even greater importance to the world in this crucial period is the production of unlimited quantities of free hydrogen. This ideal weightless fuel could be transmuted from the atmosphere while in transit without the necessity of storage capacity. What a concept. These are the important things which might now be known if Kepler's discovery had divulged the facts of geometric symmetry and dual curvature within the wave field. His law of elliptical orbits evidences that he was on the verge of discovering that 4, not 2 magnetic poles control the dual opposed balance of this two-way universe. But with 2 magnetic poles, a 3-dimensional radial universe of time intervals and sequences would be impossible. A balanced universe must have 2 poles to control centripetal gyroactive force and 2 compensating poles to control centrifugal radioactive force. Goes on to say, by means of such knowledge, science could rid the earth of fear of attack by any nation, no matter how the attack might come, whether by land, sea, or air. This new knowledge will give to science the cause of all the effects which have for centuries of research deceived the senses of scientific observers. Man has a mind as well as having senses, but he has given preference to the evidence of his senses in the building of his cosmogony. Man can reason with his senses, but he cannot know with them. Reasoning is sense thinking, not mind knowing. He has also produced effects without knowing their cause. The senses have not revealed to man that this is a substanceless universe of motion only. Neither have they told him the principle of polarity, which divides the universal equilibrium into pairs of oppositely conditioned mates to create sex-divided electric two-way universe. The time has come in the history of man when the knowledge alone can save the human race. That's a lot. That's huge. And that's where we're heading. It's a cosmic journey of perception. I know, I can't say it enough. Now, this is one, beautiful image of how shapes are created within the torus field, and even our language itself. There are many studies on the Hebrew alphabet coming from the light waves that form within this dynamic. It basically, it's all waveform in motion, conscious energetic signatures and patterns. There are no accidents. Our language, our tones are all symbolic. They all have great meaning, and we've just forgotten it. And here again, I'm just pointing to this dynamic of, reverse polarity, and how that affects, the dynamics of everything we're talking about. And in a way, when I talk about the Earth, when the magnetics, I want to point out again, with everything, I know this is a lot of information, but if the Earth, or if I should say, if and when the Earth reverses its magnetics, it doesn't necessarily mean that, the Earth will start literally stop spinning and start spinning the other way. It might, but it doesn't have to. And even if it does, I think the whole idea is the whole dynamic of the reversal of the poles will shift our perception. And it's literally changing the way we think, because everything's going to be fed from the torus field instead of from top to bottom, from the southern hemisphere to the northern hemisphere. It will now feed from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. And just that change of direction of the spin of the fields will change our perception. It doesn't matter what the physical bodies are doing. It's always been a journey of perception. Matter itself is illusion. So when we see the sun rising in the west, it's because it can't be any other way. We are creating it as we go. Our minds, everything will be reversed. We will begin our journey back into right brain consciousness, and everything will reverse itself because it is the way we perceive reality. It's all connected. Waveform is conscious, and it's interacting with us. And here's the imagery that I promised. And this is from the Resonance Science Foundation. And it was given to me by someone who I tried to explain this to way back in, I think, 2016, so about 8 years ago. I was explaining this dynamic. When you bring a bunch of people, we did a big tour with Nassim Haramein and the Resonance Science Foundation. And the followers, these people really, they were like my tribe. They all knew what I was talking about just immediately. Incredible. This one woman said, "Oh, you've got to see this because Nassim posted something like this." And this is what she sent me. So when Allan and I were talking about the yin-yang shuffle, this great reversal in direction of waveform, this image that I'm about to show you is a beautiful portrayal of how this can happen. Got to give them their due. Check it out. Isn't that beautiful? Wow.
So if you think of each one of those dots, if we're looking at the North Pole of the Earth from above, each one of those dots could be like 23.5 degrees off of the axis from true north. And true north would be a point exactly in the middle of that 2D representation of the yin-yang on the line.
Exactly. It's like giving shape to a 2D image. And it explains what even the symbolism of the yin-yang on so many levels. But when you see it expressed that way, it even makes you wonder if the yin-yang was all created because of this dynamic.
Right.
Isn't that incredible?
Well, what we're theorizing is when the Jed pillar comes back up to true north, when the axis of the Earth comes off of its tilt, the inertia of the spin of the Earth will cause the Earth to spin the other way? Is that in a yin-yang pattern? I'm trying to explain this.
Of course it does. It's sort of what I just said with the Taurus field. You know, right now it feeds from the south into the north. That's why the rabbit in the moon, you know, feeds the Easter eggs to the northern hemisphere. Well, it's a muddled way of saying it, but we have the rabbit in the moon in the southern hemisphere, and he is that dynamic that brings, you know, that welcomes the spring of a new, you know, a new cycle, a new year, and he brings us the Easter eggs, right, the primordial eggs. And he's feeding the man in the moon in the northern hemisphere, which is the material. But that's going to shift and flip. And in that flipping, yes, that whole dynamic shifts everything. And then the northern hemisphere will then seed the southern hemisphere. But the whole dynamic, because we have been looking up for all the, you know, to the circumpolar stars to define who we are, right? We're always looking at the North Pole and Vega and Polaris, and, you know, and we define everything by a northern hemisphere perspective. But when everything flips the other direction, we'll start looking to the southern hemisphere for our definition of who we are. And in the southern hemisphere, they look at the spaces, the dark rifts in the heavens, right? There's a difference in how everything is perceived, even in the mythologies. In the northern hemisphere, we say it's Mother Sirius, right? The great divine Sophia, the mother, wisdom. In the southern hemisphere, it's Father Sirius. But that's all going to shift, and, you know, and Egypt tells us south is up. So when everything shifts to south, that will be the heart-based consciousness. So there's a lot to this, but did that make sense?
This is like the hardest thing to grasp.
We'll keep it going. It is hard to grasp, and I totally get that. And I've had years to mull over this and wake up in the middle of the night in between the worlds and view all this stuff happening. I can see the dynamics, and I can feel the dynamics. And it's hard to express to people, but we'll keep trying. I'll keep trying, because it's everything. And of course, here I'm bringing up the churning of the milk again into butter, right? So they're starting the spin again, and the churning of the primordial waters spins everything into form. But now we're going to be on the other side, where we're going to unwind everything, as we disseminate form. You know, we digest form and come back to a heart-based consciousness. Any questions? I feel a hesitation.
I don't know if we explained that enough, yin-yang shuffle.
Well, we have in the past. That's why I didn't want to go too much. This is sort of like a last-minute episodal reminder of everything we've talked about. I mean, we did the How to Turn Lead into Gold series. I mean, we've done so many ways. And at one point, we're going to do a whole thing on Dendera. And I know what you're saying, but
I like, even I'm confused. And I know what you're saying, but like all of the parts when you talk about us looking to the north for our orientation, and then maybe we'll look to the south, none of that ever makes sense to me. And we've talked about this before, because to me it's like looking up, you're looking at the sky, and you look down, you're looking at the ground. What
is defining up and down?
From your orientation of where you're standing on the earth. Like, up is above your head, down is towards your feet.
Well, down is towards your feet for the people in the southern hemisphere, yet they're still told to look through their feet to.
I know, but no matter how hard people in the northern hemisphere look, they're never going to see the constellations in the southern hemisphere.
Oh, you're wrong about that.
Why? It's hidden by the rest of the earth. We can't see it.
No, but that's if you believe the earth exists. And
are you saying you see through the earth to the sky on the other side?
You know, because you are heart-based. We don't need flashlights to see in the dark. We know that form is the illusion. We become the current. Because, see, that is the difference. We're spinning out of a belief in form. We're spinning out of that belief that everything is real. You know, that this table in front of me is a real thing. We spin out of that and we become shapeshifters. We have the ability to create our image in any given moment. How do I want to express today? What am I feeling? We're not locked into this density, lead, right? We're not locked into this density of expression any longer. We become unlocked. We get out of the cave and we are free. You know, the spirit is freed from the container. And in that way, we begin to understand all the dynamics. We're not even all wrapped up in South and North anymore. We're just living in the now moment. So yeah, it's a whole new way of perceiving reality, and that's the point. And when we know, when everything is heart-based, we are living in peace. We are expressing ourselves freely. And I will say and continue to say that the deepest desire that we all have is to be able to express, have freedom of expressions, freedom to be who we want, freedom to say what we want without being censored by our government, by our parents, by our lover. To be able to be who you are and not be afraid that someone isn't going to like that. And this is we are caught up in a dynamic of fear-based dynamic that just allows us to be controlled. And to be kept silent because we're afraid to be who we are from many different levels and many different ways. We are literally contained from being ourselves. And this is from the time we're born. You know, from the time we're young children and we're told children are meant to be silent until spoken to. And, you know, don't cry because I'll give you something to cry about. And you know, you can't express your inner knowing because you're told you're not right. We're told it's not real. You know, the magic beings that we see, you know, and the power that we think we have, we're told doesn't exist. Our magical world is literally denied to us, you know, from the time we're children. And it's a right brain consciousness. I'm not putting any judgment on it. But when that shifts and everything moves, the magnetic field changes everything. Consciousness is in the waveform. Consciousness is in the magnetic field. And when that flips, that's shifting everything in an entirely different direction. That's the yin-yang shuffle. And that's the most exciting moment. And I think that's why we all lined up to be here, is because that's the moment that we can literally begin to break free from the chains that have bound us, right? To the Big Dipper. We are suddenly free to be who we are and express ourselves however we wish without being afraid.
But we're talking about a physical thing that's going to happen to the Earth also.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because when you say, but you don't get it, we're talking about a physical thing. I'm saying we are suddenly going to know that we're not talking about a physical thing. The physical thing is the illusion. There is no Earth, right? There is only me in this moment, in this now moment, expressing myself as all these individuated aspects. And I'm calling all those individuated aspects back to my center now. So we don't go from being the way we are today at the lowest point of human conscious awareness all the way to the top. No, it's a beginning of the journey back to center. But when that flipping happens, it's a change. It's a reversal of direction of perception. It's a different path back to center instead of expressing out into separation. And that journey becomes a beautiful journey of awakening our senses to who we really are. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's not an instantaneous change. It's the
No, no, no,
beginning.
no, 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 it can't be. And just like the Yuga cycles show us, Kali, we go from Kali descending to Kali rising and then into the higher levels of consciousness. It can't be automatically you go from one to the other. Oh, no. It's the beginning of the reversal of spin. And that reversal of spin changes the way we think. And it's sort of like, you're winding up and then you're unwinding back to center, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's, and again, this wonderful image of the churning of the milk is in a way showing this. I think in a way you're churning the milk into form, and we're going to spin that milk right back into the formless. Digestion of form. We're no longer going to believe that any of this is real. It's all a journey of perception as we go back to center. And when we get to center, that is our moment of complete bliss. That's when the unicorn is freed, right? From its container. And, the unicorn is the one single seed of consciousness. We have come back to the single seed of consciousness. This is why we don't see unicorns today, right? Because we're still in this, separation consciousness. And it's a journey back to center. The breath, outtake of breath, and then that intake doesn't happen in a second. I think it's faster, though, as we perceive time and space, because speed is an element, just like we feel that everything's speeding up now. We have, these moments of things being more heavy. We feel heavier, and everything feels dense and hard and difficult. But that all begins to change and go back. So yeah, no, we're just here for the reversal, but it's a long journey back to center, and we're not done yet. But I do say we can do it in any great yogic breath, and that's the point of saying it's a pattern that gives us, it tells us what the journey of perception is, and it's a pattern. And once you know the pattern, I don't think you have to wait for the cycles of the sun, because there is, in the cycles of the earth and the Yuga, and none of this is real. It's a pattern. And I think this is why we see the great adepts in the East and in India. They are able to walk through walls. They're able to be in two places at the same time, because they understood. They became the Heka. They knew how to harness the patterns to create the portals to other dimensions of beingness. So, yeah. So here I just have another, again, this is, I haven't shown this image before, and I just want to keep pointing out that it is everywhere. This is in the Yucatan, and it's Mayan. And yeah, the spin reverses. Here you can see it again. Badami caves in India on the ceiling. Reversal of spin as we move around the heavens. Different perceptions of reality based on the spinning waveform. Or does the spinning of the waveform just give us the patterns of the expression of the game board, we all agreed to have this experience of the hero's journey, and this is our game board. This is the breath. This is how scalar energy works, and it can't be any other way. And that's the most important thing. And you're right. The thing that makes us stumble and fall when we think about this is when we fall out of that feeling of being between the worlds, and we go back to saying, oh, but this is real, and I can't do that, because we live in a 3D world of confinement. We are held hostage by the way we perceive the world. So, I think that my biggest reason for coming forward with all of this isn't to talk about an upcoming cataclysmic event, or that you know, we got to worry about the sun and the magnetic fields fading, because these things are happening, and I will present, you know, different ideas that other people are talking about as well for navigating these events. But I'm really bringing it forward to break us free from these ties that are binding us and telling us we have no power, and telling us that we can't, and you're too small to make a difference in the world. And I'm trying to present the knowledge, or the knowing that is so profound that you'll embody it and realize that you are more powerful than you ever dreamed possible. And all we need to do is be present with every choice that we make. And being present and with the knowing of how you're affecting not only everyone and everything, not only in your environment, but in our whole scope of vision, but it's also affecting yourself and your journey. You are creating your reality with every choice you make. That's how powerful you are. And if you don't like the way things are in the world today, then change the way you're treating your cells, your beingness, your animals, the animals in nature, the people that surround you. How are you choosing to interact? And my whole thought was, we turn around and we start to love everything, everyone, every sentient being anyway, because we all devolve together. Nobody's going to turn around and be perfect. But if we start by loving them anyway, that's, you know, and again, being conscious of every choice that we make, we will single-handedly begin to change the world. And we will absolutely, definitely change our own environment, because it can't be any other way. So again, yin-yang shuffle, here's the point. Polaris to Vega, the two opposing wave spins. The golden age to, we are in the, what do we call it, the lead age? I don't know. We're definitely in Kali Yuga. We are at the bottom, at our most isolated, our most dense experience of the world. We are in pain. We have moments of bliss, but we are all, humanity is in pain. And we can remove the blocks of the flow, and restore our health and bring joy back into our lives. And we can be heart-centered. Our hearts can be lighter. We can be lighthearted again if we remember how powerful we are. And here is the yin-yang shuffle with this wonderful, I've shown this, I think, once before, in the left hand and the eye, and the two wave spins. And this is from the hand-eye paint palette at the Moundville, housed in the Jones Archaeological Museum in Moundville. And, you know, it's just so beautiful. You can see the two knots. It's the Sima Taui in another expression. We just want to get back to center. And to do that, we need to start breathing back in again. Digest the form. Remember who we are. And remember means bringing our individuated aspects back to our center. Remember ourselves. Here's our circle of pole stars, right? What time is it? What stage of consciousness are we in? You know, as the Earth's axis spins around the circumpolar stars, the magnetic field transforms, and with it, conscious awareness rises and falls, depending on which way we're spinning. It makes a difference. I've shown this image before, and it's the same journey. This is it in all its glory, and here I have some keys to help everyone understand what I'm showing. But there's our field of vision, right? That's the net. It's the glorious eye. It's called the resurrection of the glorious eye, perception of reality. And it's known as the net. It's the space-time continuum. And we see on the far left where the papyrus pillar falls out of balance, and it's a 23.5-degree angle. And the Kepler beetle begins its journey of pushing the sun across the heavens. That symbol, that bar, represents Pet, the heavens, right? And that's ascending consciousness. And when we get to the other side, there is a symbol of the moon at the top. And many believe this represents that, that moment when we have a full moon, when we have a full moon, you can see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time. You could call that an eclipse moment. And it's a moment of silence when the sun and the moon come together. And you see the baboon, wisdom from within, sitting on the erect papyrus pillar. And that's where we're going to be headed next. It's the day cycle. And then at the bottom, you can see the two ibis birds, wisdom from above. Thoth as wisdom from above, descending and going back to the moment that the Jed pillar, has fallen again. And this is our journey of perception in a nutshell or a nutshell. And again, I want to point out that ancient magnetic equator. This is from, he calls himself Chuck from Las Vegas, Nevada. And I saw this on his YouTube channel. I could not find any other information about him. But he came across this by looking at Google images, and he talked about an ancient equator 12,500 years ago. He's one of many who have found this same dynamic, just as I did by studying the mythology of the Sphinx, who was once Tefnut. It's what we're looking at is basically, I have the image on the right to show you that line that he has found that connects all of these ancient sites across the world goes right through the Sphinx. Mm. That's just amazing. Yeah, because of course it is. Goes through Siwa and Petra. It's a line of fertility that promised a bountiful harvest. Went through Easter Island, the Nazca drawings, Angkor Wat, Mohenjo-Daro, Petra, Siwa, and the Sphinx, Giza pyramids, all aligned on a single great circle around the earth when we were in our moment of silence. And then it started to move, and it's now in the south around Ethiopia and that area, and it's all messed up and all over the place because we fell out of Ma'at, we fell out of balance. And here we see again Sokar riding the moment of silence. Sokar represents that sacred moment of silence before we spin again, and he's on that single perfect serpent. Sokar, the Giza Plateau in the beginning. It's an interdimensional portal, dual opposing wave spin. The image underneath the Akhet here, the horizon, is the image for time, cycling time, spinning in and out from yesterday and tomorrow, day and night cycles. And in the center, the Hor rising. That's my name. It's our name, Horus rising. And we see the Hor riding the seed of life, riding the serpents, Nekbet and Wadjet, that are about to separate. And Allan and I saw the image on the left at the Met in New York. And unfortunately, I didn't get a picture. I got it from the two sides, but not from behind. But on the back is an image of He, H-E-H, and he represents in the infinite and eternal cycles. Yeah, what I just said. It's on the back struts of the throne, which is, again, an image for the Ark of the Covenant. It's called, even there, they have a card that says it's called God's throne. And of course, it's the power of God on earth being carried by the lions. These are earth-based currents that are subjected to solar, stellar, lunar radiation. And these are the things that affect Earth's currency, causing the divine feminine, the nurturing side, and the energy of the woman scorned, which can be the opposite, Sekhmet energy. So this is the energy that creates our perception of reality on Earth. And waveform is conscious. This is so important. Here we see the erect Jed pillar, the spine of the Earth, and the Ankh with, it's basically the Tet, or the symbol of Isis, with the wings of the Ankh are down. The magnetic field is down for a moment of silence before we breathe out in two dual opposing spins. Which way will you spin? Here we have our seat of consciousness as the Hor, and there's Nekbet and Wadjet, and look at their feet going in two different directions, because it can't be any other way. And at the beginning of this, we see Ra-Harakti, and you see the crook, and the crook is what sets our boundaries as we start to spin again, our lines. And of course, the image of Anubis on top of it, the path opener for embalming us in currency. And these are two images of Ninth with the crowns of Upper and Lower Egypt. She is the Primordial Waters. And of course, those two crowns represent the two hemispheres of our brain and the two hemispheres of the Earth and Earth-based consciousness. Navigating the currents, two paths of perception. This is so cool. On the far left, you see the image of the obelisk, and it has an eye in the center. It's a beam from the heart of the sun. It's conscious. And it's a symbol with this mound coming out of Amente, right? And we see Wadjet coming out of the mound and delivering the eye from his wings to the feminine figure here. And we see an upper and a lower path represented by two different symbols with oars for navigating the two paths of perception. Which way will you spin? And here's a wonderful portrayal of the myth of the solar eye. And this is about Tefnut, and it's a nature myth. The cosmic event is reflected in the departure and return of the solar cat Tefnut, that the sun is lower in the sky in winter than in summer. The ancient Egyptians assumed that the path they believed the sun to traverse was shifted south in the winter, after which it was then shifted back north again in the spring. Sound familiar? Tefnut, daughter of the sun god Re, leaves her homeland of Egypt and goes to Upper Nubia, which was more to the south. Where did that current go? But at her father's command, she is brought back by Thoth, the messenger of the gods. In connection with his mission, Thoth takes the form of a monkey, the baboon, and thanks to his eloquence, heart-based consciousness, succeeds in accomplishing his difficult task of leading the Ethiopian cat home. So she took this conscious fertility of water south to Ethiopia, and Thoth turns into heart-based consciousness in order to cajole her to come back and bring the lush waters back to Egypt. And there was a time that Egypt was lush and beautiful. This is when Tefnut leaves. She takes the wonderful waters south. And now it's going to be a celebration of the return of the solar eye. And they had festivals of drunkenness to celebrate the return of the life force of the land and heart-based consciousness itself. So his artful play on words, interwoven with amusing and educational sayings, forms the core of the mystical story. But this story is profound, and it's telling you the story of what happens during this great year of reversal of consciousness. And of course, it's all about consciousness. It's about Thoth. It's about the life force of the land and heart-based versus mind-based consciousness. Henry Bergson says, fortunately, some are born with spiritual immune systems that sooner or later give rejection to the illusory worldview grafted upon them from birth through social conditioning. They begin sensing that something is amiss and start looking for answers. Inner knowledge and anomalous outer experiences show them a side of reality others are oblivious to. And so begins their journey of awakening. Each step of the journey is made by following the heart instead of following the crowd, and by choosing knowledge over the veils of ignorance. Same message. So, my final question is, which way will you spin? I think I've said it a few times now. And this from Plato's Sophist and Statement. He says, there was a time when God, they say, when there was a time when God directed the revolutions of the world, but at the completion of a certain cycle, he let go, and the world, by a necessity of its nature, turned back and went round the other way. For divine things alone are unchangeable, but the earth and heavens, although endowed with many glories, have a body, and are therefore liable to perturbation. In the case of the world, the perturbation is very slight and amounts only to a reversal of motion. For the Lord of moving things is alone self-moved. Neither can piety allow that he goes at one time in one direction and at another time in another, or that God has given the universe opposite motions, or that there are two gods, one turning it in one direction and another in another. But the truth is that there are two cycles of the world, and in one of them it is governed by an immediate providence and receives life and immortality, and in the other is let go again and has a reverse action during infinite ages. Enough said.
My goodness.
It's a lot, I know. It's challenging, but when you're able to embrace this as a great knowing, as I've said, it has the ability to help each one of us change everything that no longer serves us in this current expression of reality. And that's an exciting thought, but it's even more so because it is, in my opinion, this is our truth, and so many out there have already proven that we have this ability and that we can communicate with waveform and with water and with every cell in our body. And my gosh, I think it's definitely time for a reversal of spin. And yeah, even just going through this today has me thinking on so many different levels. I have learned to be so careful when I make a choice, and so aware of myself, even trying to talk myself out of doing, into doing things or out of doing things, and going, patting myself and saying, no. You're lying to yourself, and, and remembering that everything I do has an effect, and everything I help, every opportunity I have to help someone, something, an animal, anything in need, it's an opportunity for me to make a difference on, many, many, many levels. And it begins to bring you great joy. And even that is just wonderful today with all the struggles that we face. And I'm not saying the struggles magically go away, but they do begin to become less important. And we learn how to find peace amidst the chaos. And the next episode, we're going to be talking about chaos. So we are going to need to hone these tools I think it's a whole lot easier than we think it is.
Would you like to say something quickly about your tours coming up?
Oh, well, these I won't take a lot of time. If you're interested in going on one of these magical journeys with me and some of my other speakers, I am going to Turkey in October with geologist Susan Moore, who I just spoke about. She's incredible. She and I were both there in 2019 September, and we just can't wait to get back again. There is so much. The land itself is powerful, but there's just so much there that also speaks to a lot of the things Allan and I have been talking about. And I'll be doing the Stars Over Egypt tour in November, and that's going to be exciting. I work for the first time with Ksenia Moore and David Warner Matheson, and he's a expert on star myths. So we're going to be talking about all these things and learning more. I just did a podcast with Ksenia, and you know, I've always talked about the headset, and the pharaoh would have to go through the headset ritual, which is that coming back into balance ritual that the kings would do in order to bring the power of God back down to earth. And she said, "Why was it 30 years?" And I said, "Well, gee, I never, I had different ideas, but I never thought about it." And she goes, "It could have to do with the full cycle of the moon, the waxing and the waning. To a full cycle of the moon is really considered almost a 30, it can be a 30-day cycle, right? Monthly cycle." And I thought, my gosh, she hit the nail on the head. Osiris is the man in the moon. And of course, it represents the journey of Osiris. And the sun, the moon is the reflected light of the sun, and as the sun gets older, it needs to prove that it has the right to rule in the heavens, right? That's what the king is doing. So I only point, I'm just including that little story because it tells you what happens when all of these experts come together, and each and every one of the people in our groups come with their own special ideas and information and areas of expertise. And together, we always have so many aha moments on all of our journeys. So, yeah, always exciting. So, at any rate, yeah, hope you can join us.